Welcome to Game Changers by Logitech G, the 6-part podcast for the ones taking the risks, breaking the mould and changing the game. I'll be talking to a variety of people in the gaming world about different topics, from diversity in gaming to its effect on mental health. I'm your host, Alan Boyston. Advertising in games is only getting bigger, as Wendy's joining Fortnite and winning a Cannes Lion Award last year shows. Game companies estimate that the US market for in-game advertising on all devices will exceed $3 billion in 2020, despite gamers saying that it hinders their experience. Although marketing pollutes our games with brand messages that we may not want, it does bring a lot more money to the industry, and in some cases, more games. The bulk of gamers said they would be happy to see an increase in advertising in video games if it means a lower RRP. Today I'm joined by Nina Mackey and Rob Dagwell of BidStack. Nina, Rob, welcome to the Logitech G podcast today. You both work for BidStack, but you have very different roles within the company. Nina, first tell me a bit about your role on the marketing aspect.
Yeah, sure. Hi, Alan. Thanks for having us on today. So my role at BidStack is a startup company. So I look at agency partnerships and I help educate the market when new technology is created. So a lot of that involves just going out and speaking to the advertising side. So I deal quite heavily with advertising agencies and brands.
So Rob, you work on the other aspect at BidStack. What does that involve? Liaising with games companies that sort of piggy in the middle, essentially. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so I'm sort of the middleman, so to speak, in between the publishers, developers, and BidStack. And as a game myself, basically, I help vet out the games within the market, because obviously not all games want advertising, not all games can have advertising, so I've sort of sit in the middle and make sure that the publishers are happy through the onboarding process if they say yes, but also understand exactly what they're getting into and how it all works, and make sure they understand all the process we have. Okay,
so Nina, we're seeing more marketing in video games. Can you tell us a little bit about the last few years, how it's grown, and give us some examples and some successful examples in recent times as well?
Yeah, sure, of course. So obviously, going way back to console days, people will be familiar with having seen brands, especially in sort of sports games or racing games or other titles that are similar. When ads were seen in those games back in sort of a decade or so ago, they were actually hard-coded into the game, which meant, if you were Coca-Cola, for example, and you wanted to be in version of FIFA, you would have to contact the game publisher ahead of the game design and release, and they would have to design the billboards and the pitch side hoardings to include your advertising. Obviously times have moved on. That is still being done in many respects. If you want to do bespoke partnerships with game publishers, you will have to still go down that route. What BidStack have been trying to do and have managed to successfully do today is actually create a piece of technology which allows you to serve that advertising during when the game's actually being played. So that's obviously called programmatic, which we'll go into a little bit later on. It's a massive step for the industry because it means that there's flexibility in terms of not just how many ads you run, but who actually sees the ads and whether those ads are relevant, which is something that you've never been able to do before. An old partnership with, say, a racing brand, let's just say, I don't know if it was Red Bull and Formula One, for example, that partnership would be exactly what you would see in the real world. So there's no flexibility there. Doesn't matter who's playing it or what country they're in, they'll see the same ad. Nowadays, with BidStack's technology, we can, obviously factor in that somebody may be playing the game in Germany or in the US. It might be a female playing a game, it could be a male, and then obviously age demographics as well. These are all factors that we can determine what sort of ads should be served at the right time.
Let's talk about brands included in the gameplay then. What's a few good examples, Rob, would you say, where brands have been included?
Yes, I mean, obviously you've got Wendy's and Fortnite, as you mentioned, and that's part of this new age of in-game advertising and how it's changed over the last 2020 now, probably last 15 years or so. And the reason that's been allowed to happen is the technological advancements within the game industry. So obviously you've got things like, go back to 2004 or whatever, the quality of the games and the quality of the ad placements and stuff probably looked a bit cheesy. It looked like someone just sort of badge slapped on there, which no brand likes to be known for doing or anything like that. Come bring it forward to 2020 and we have the technology to be able to incorporate your brand into a game so it fits in seamlessly with the gameplay narrative. Like Wendy's in Fortnite, you can have your Wendy's character and stuff like that. There have been moments in the past where games haven't, although it's not a brand directly in the gameplay, brands have tried to get involved in the game industry and it hasn't always gone their way. There is a brand whose name I will not mention, but they are a popular fast food brand, and they had a bit of a nightmare on the live streaming platform Twitch, and they put an icon on there of a fast food item, and it backfired against them within about 15 minutes on a massive channel thing. It went down the racist alley, and it didn't pan out too well for them. But then there are also big success rates of various different brands within gaming. Mercedes have got involved within a lot of racing games like Forza, off the back of their partnership with Formula One. There are different ways to get involved, and Wendy's, Mercedes and stuff is there part of the new age.
Let's talk about an example then. Death Stranding. Game came out last year, apocalyptic future, but you've got a fridge with perfect cans of Monster Energy in it.
Yes.
It created a buzz, so you could say it's successful. There's a lot of people talking about it, a lot of people seeing it, but your suspension of disbelief of being in the game is over when you find your perfect fridge full of Monster Energy when there's no humans left hardly in the world, comparatively speaking. I don't know where they're manufacturing it, for example. What do we call? Is that successful or not successful? What do we think of an exercise like that?
Yes, I guess from the product side of things, it is successful because gamers have noticed your brand. That's the point. You can't sell anything through a game. They can't be playing Death Stranding and buy a can of Monster. But that is that brand recognition, that brand association. That if you see it often enough, you build up brand trust, whether you realise it or not, even if it's subliminally. You see it a lot in the football market these days. Whether you agree with it or not, betting is very formidable within the football market, and that's how brands build up that brand trust. By every time you watch football, you see the same adverts from the same brands, and you build up that brand trust and that brand association. And it works. It's no different in gaming. Every time a gamer turns on their PlayStation or Xbox or whatever, they see your brand, they see it. They may not acknowledge it, they may find it funny, but it's there at the end of the day, and they can still say, I associate that brand with this game. I
think that Death Stranding is interesting because you know that it's going to be a relatively successful game. We know that anyway. Hideo Kojima's behind it. They put a drinks brand in there that you know that because it stands out and it doesn't fit into the game world, and it just seems a bit silly, it makes you laugh or something, it sort of works and doesn't work. I'm kind of torn when I look at that as a gamer, because there's a part of me that says, yeah, they got a brand in there, but was that the right way to put the brand in there? It didn't aid the sales of the game because the game sells itself, but did it aid the sales of Monster Energy? So the next thing I guess I'll ask Uni, you probably know more about this, is when a brand appears in a game, take Monster Energy as a good example that many viewers will know there, or the Wendy's. Yeah. What is the barometer of success? How do we track that?
That's a good question, and I think it's probably the sort of the golden question that every advertising planner or creative agency, right, is how do you find that balance, between something that's a little bit outrageous, or maybe you're innovating in terms of it might not be a natural fit. But it depends on the brand, and I think if you look at Monster and their relationship with gamers, it's a very long-running relationship. It's the same with Red Bull. So there are certain brands that can definitely get away with it, and it doesn't really matter what they do. Actually, probably the more silly it is, the better. And I think, Grand Theft Auto as well, another example of a game that doesn't allow brands to have their own branding in there, but if they have a parody brand, so something satirical, or if there's a humorous tone to it, then yeah, it's a possibility, right? Yeah. So I think there's two sort of aspects to what makes it successful or not. As Rob pointed out, the fast food brand, that could have been a successful campaign, but they did it on the wrong platform. And what they didn't factor in was that there would be a whole lot of unpoliced comments on the right-hand side that everybody can see that's brand associated. So things like that, when it's in-game, i.e. it's brand safe, you have complete control of the content and you know what's, how it's going to appear and what it's going to look like. I think it's reasonably safe, even if it isn't a fit with the game. Make a comedy element out of it, and it will still be deemed a success. And I think DHL, another brand that you wouldn't really align necessarily with gaming. They put a huge amount of money into esports a few years ago, and they actually had they sponsored a tournament which I can't remember the name of.
I think it was
a
ESI Birmingham, or ESI One,
it was
ESL
big,
One Birmingham.
Yeah, and they actually had like a functioning delivery robot, so you could go in and you could play it. They did lots of stuff like this in different markets at different game expos and events, really pushing quite hard for esports alignment. So they sponsored esports tournaments as well, and it worked. People actually now think of DHL as a gaming partner. So, if you do it right as a brand, you can be completely unknown to gamers, and as long as you do the right stuff, yes, it's a success. So, I think they've had a huge amount of success from doing that kind of sponsorship angle.
Now, brands will come to you and they'll say, well, I want to target particular demographics, particular game titles. Rob, I mean, it seems to me that sport seems to be the obvious one, because you've got hoardings around stadiums, you've got hoardings around racetracks, and that's why in a way I was sort of surprised with, I suppose, Grand Theft Auto has hoardings everywhere, but they have their brand and they know what they're doing. You advertise, you advise companies, I guess, in terms of what games and markets they should be targeting, what age group, because brands, they come to you and they say, we want to be in video games. They don't always know what to do. What kind of advice do you give them?
Well, it completely depends on what they want out of it. Because coming along saying I want to advertise in gaming is no different to saying, oh, I want to advertise in sport. Gaming is a very generic term, and these days covers so many different aspects of so many different things and so many levels. So you can't just say I want to advertise in sport. A brand would say, right, I want to advertise. This is my target audience, and they are watching this sport.
Yeah.
So it's the same in gaming. This is my target audience, and based on research, they are playing these kind of games, or they're likely to play this genre more than that genre. Their peak playing times are Friday nights as opposed to Sunday afternoons. And stuff like that, and you can really base your advertising campaign all around that. So I think one thing brands and agencies and everyone, even in the game industry, everyone has to learn is there are so many layers to it. You can't just say I'm going to advertise in gaming, because I mean you're a gamer. Gaming will eat you alive if you get it wrong. If you get it, this is an industry that is fed solely by social networking. Once it's on the internet, you can't get it back. Yeah. So if you get it wrong once, they know about it, and people will remember it.
It's always important to get it right, and that's where you both work for the same company. But I've always found there's two sides to marketing. There is the side that is purely number crunching. What's your numbers and what can we deliver? Then the other side is the creative process. These two is constantly clashing, because I often say, well, if something's creative but it's well put together, but it has less numbers, you just want to be involved with quality as well as quantity in that way. How do you both find the balance? Because I mean, I assume you'll have some big brands that sometimes say, I just want my brand in that game as it is. I want you to make it happen. Yeah, and you have to educate that brand essentially. What would be, or I say educate, I mean you have to find a compromise that works for them. I mean,
and I think one thing that's worth pointing out here is advertising in game in the way that we do it is actually very new. So, as Rob pointed out, you might find there's lots of brands out there that want to be aligned with gaming. They know that you can now advertise in game, but the reality is that in terms of the number of big game titles out there that have the ability to serve ads programmatically, it's tiny, right? So it's not like this is a fully developed ad category that people can just plug in and buy ads, right? So we're a good few years away from that. So it's the technology has been created, it's in its infancy. And really, from my side and from the advertising side, our job is educating those big brands on, you want to be testing this now. You want to be somebody who is at the forefront of understanding how gamers react to the types of ads that you do. What are the types of ads you can do? I mean, if you're talking about what BidStack have done, so we've stayed very much in the realm of esports and focusing on big titles where you would naturally see ads anyway in the real world, right? Yeah. So looking at games that are within esports or that would have ads in those places in the real world and sticking to that because it's a natural fit. As the channel evolves, we will start to see ads in more open world games that are served programmatically, so a bit like Monster and Death Stranding.
So let's talk then. Programmatic advertising. I've always known it as sort of banner ads on websites that target the demographics.
You're not incorrect.
Tell us a bit of, for the audience who may not know what programmatic advertising is, if you can tell us briefly what that is and examples of how we could see that in games.
So, I mean, all programmatic is just an automated way of buying and selling ad placements, and that could be anywhere. That could be on your website that you're on, it could be on a mobile device. So obviously with gaming it's new because there's never been a bit of technology that can let you serve them automated in a game until BidStack built it's called an SDK. And that piece of kit, as the publisher, the game title puts that in there, it means that any available ad slots, if you like, that sit within the game, we can serve an ad in real time. It can be bid on by multiple brands, and the winning bid that ad will be served. That's all it is. It's like an auction basically, and it's all automated. And the way they're served is based on the data that's available from the game publisher.
Right. So the question on that then is, they have their logo, they have their assets, they send those assets across. Do those assets, I mean, do they need to be ordered to organised in particular ad sizes? I mean, because I imagine different games have completely different layouts in the way they could show it. They may have a colour palette and hues and stuff like that alter the
I mean, and tech-wise, this is the bit that took quite a long time. So if you imagine a standard ad size, so say 728 by 90, right, we'll go with that. It's a standard size for display ads. What our tech does is it takes that same size and it repurposes it for the in-game. So it factors in, the ad might be at an angle, it might be being splashed with water, it might be semi-visible through daylight or nighttime, and it adjusts the ad in real time to the gameplay, and that's the cool bit of technology. In terms of what you're asking about, sort of the actual content of the ad, so the assets and the creative, it's limited. I'll be honest. I think we are at the beginning of what we're doing, and again, esports and racing games and things like that is a natural fit. So any ads that you would see in the real world, we can replicate that in game, and it keeps it nice and simple. You can't click on them like you would if you were on our website. It doesn't direct you anywhere because you're in a game environment. And I'd say probably football pitch side ads, so where you see LED animated ads, that's probably about as fancy as it gets at the moment.
I mean, it doesn't. We've spoken about it countless times in the office. It doesn't need to be more than that. Like in-game advertising, it doesn't need to be what mobile advertising has become. You don't need to throw ads on something just because it's got an audience there. Like, I mean, you may have a fantastic sports game with a fantastic stadium environment, but if you don't have the billboards pre-built in, there's no point in just slapping an ad in there just because it'll be in view. It doesn't work like that. You've got to protect the game itself, and because the game is a piece of artwork, you can't ruin it. And if you get the ad wrong, be it the creative the ad is in, like if it stands out too much and just looks a bit silly, if it doesn't fit in with the environment, if it's got too much writing on, looks a bit messy, if you're playing a racing game going at 200 miles an hour, probably crashing into the sign, you probably don't want a video ad because you can't read it. So there are so many different things to bring in, and if you get it right, it can be received really, really well, and it adds to that realism of the game. Because if you're playing FIFA, for example, or Madden or something, if you take the ads out, although most users probably wouldn't notice it if you just had billboards with nothing on, just black billboards, but they'll sit there and say something's missing,
weird,
something's not right, and you'd notice it if you're watching real life football. If you're watching Arsenal perform fantastically at the Emirates, you would notice that if the billboards were off or they started flickering or there was an ad on there that you thought, did that just say what I think it said or something? That's a really weird brand to see on there. And although you don't talk about it, it's not a water coolest moment at all of what you see on a billboard. If it's not there, you notice it's not there, and when it's there, it adds to the realism, and it's the exact same in game.
So that brings me to the next question, which really is, you've got this system, you put advertising into games, that's only going to get better and better in terms of technology. But now you need to educate games developers. So how do you get in front of games developers? Because yes, the obvious fit is obviously sports games, but if developers know that there's other opportunities around games, then they might be able to integrate features that improves this tech as we move forward. Rob, I assume you're talking more to developers about these opportunities. Yeah. What's some good examples of success now of what's currently available, but also what you're looking at in the future in terms of how to improve this service?
Yeah, I mean, so actually getting in front of game devs it's pretty easy. I mean, the gaming industry as a whole moves so quickly. You don't have time to say no to a possibly emerging technology. Okay, it might not be for you, but there's so much happening. They get so many different requests, especially with the likes of VR and AR and all that coming out. There's always something new and always something new to listen to and just be aware of in the industry. Yeah. Some publishers and developers are really for it. Yeah. Some aren't, and that's completely fine. You can't, like I said earlier, you can't force an ad into the game because they're very wary, because some of these games they could have spent years working on. I mean, one coming out hopefully towards the end of this year, Cyberpunk 2077. That's been in development since 2013, I think. Yep. And that's been pushed back and back and back, and people are getting really annoyed with it, but at the end of the day they've only pushed it back because they want it to be perfect. Yeah. So you can imagine approaching a company like that and saying, do you want to put ads on it? They may hesitate, but then as long as you explain and you make sure everything works well, because that is a fantastic environment for ads to be in. Yeah. As long as you do it right, it can fit well. And that's what you got to explain. So it's just about basically making sure they understand what they're getting into and how it may sound awful. It may, because their first thought is probably what the hell, because
no chance.
Gaming and advertising, they're not friends. They haven't been for a long time. And we sit in the middle of that almost semi-broken relationship, and we're the mediator. We're trying to couple them back up, because it does work. It's just the industry's been burnt in the past, and a lot of people in gaming know that. Like we've had a few publishers say, "Oh, what about this?" Because companies have tried doing it in the past, back in the early 2000s, but the technology wasn't there, or the game graphics weren't there. And if you got a game with really bad graphics, it just makes any ad look awful. Yeah. And so, whereas now we're at the point in gaming where, you can game in 4K. So ads can look stunning and really suit the environment. So it's just about that education piece. But the other side of the coin is a lot of them already know about it. A lot of them know it's possible. A lot of them are doing it already in different formats, like on mobile. A lot of people are advertising. Voodoo, a massive mobile company, they smash out their marketing on Instagram and stuff. They have loads of reward-based advertising and that, but just because they're doing it that way doesn't mean that the doors close on another way. You know, it's opening a new door and making sure they understand how the process works.
You mentioned Cyberpunk, and straight away your mind goes to a place of, what's your ad going to be like in 2080 or something? Think about a future version of your own product and integrating that, and it just makes people laugh, but they know exactly what you're talking about.
That could be quite appealing though to the brand. Absolutely. That idea of being able to be like, right, we can, because you can't just put a typical ad into the game. You have to be able to adapt the artwork to suit the style. I mean, say take Red Dead Redemption, for example. That is going all the way back, and most brands probably couldn't go in there looking at the late 1800s. But say a brand like Coke, that was around late 1800s. Like if in the event you have a very old ad artwork locked away, or you can have your creative team have a bit of freedom and go mad with it, you can make it look really, really smart, as long as you don't ruin the artwork of the game, which is something we make sure we do, and we have loads of processes, systems involved that we make sure that doesn't happen.
Get your barrel of energy drink.
Exactly.
Yeah, sort of thing. It's interesting. We've gone from a point where literally brands would actually make their own games. I remember sort of in the 90s, something like Cool Spot, where you played as the red spot from 7-Up. In a game, basically. It was quite popular at the time. But now brands would be better advertised, really, to form a partnership with established gaming brands and advertise in that sense. I guess you come from different angles now. You've got the games companies on one side, and they've got the creative vision that they don't want to alter in any way. You've got the brand on the other side. Where would you two disagree in terms of, or have a point where you come a bit of friction in terms of how do we make this happen? What's the most important thing at the end? Because that client, they want to spend money, and you've got somebody who wants to make money, How do we, but in a way that works in that sense?
I think that's a good question, and as Rob quite rightly pointed out, BidStack are sort of a mediator. That is our position here. Yes, there's lots and lots of money to be made from advertising in game, but you've got to remember the major game publishers out there are pretty rich already. Advertising is really not that important to them, and that's the reality here, right? So there has to be something else that's a priority, and that, of course, is, does it enrich the game player? Does it enrich the experience for the gamer, right? And you have to have both people in agreement here that from the publisher side, yes, I can see how having said brand within my game is going to add to authenticity, or it aligns really well, or it's personalised and it's targeting the right person. All that aside, from the publisher side, it has to match with what the brand want out of it, which would be, I want to build a relationship with X 18 to 34-year-old in the UK, right? So it's not, there is definitely a long-running feud, if you like, between gaming and advertising, and I think that's where BidStack, it's really important that we come in with the arguments from both sides. That's why Rob's so important with his opinions and his views on a gaming side, and why my role is important, because I look at it from the brand's needs and wants. There's always a middle ground, and I think especially now that the technology is there, we are able to protect both the brand and the publisher from things going wrong, right? So unless you do something really risky, like the fast food brand thing on Twitch, if you keep it off open forum and you do something that's really well thought out, that has brand safety measures in place, that has a strict prohibited list or things like that, there are lots and lots of ways that you can protect both the brand and the game publisher from things going wrong.
Excellent. And something I'm also interested in is indie games. We obviously the bigger companies have resource to develop a lot of tech. I listening to you, I look at general advertising, and you have your giant websites that can afford do direct companies and deals with publishers worth huge amounts. But then you have the pots, if you like, for all sort of mid-sized websites. Can you see something ever happening like that for games, where you have indie games? They're not going to be top 10 chart sellers, but where you can say, look, we've got these 30 games, but they're reaching very targeted demographics in that sense. So, these 10 games are racing games. They're not as big as Forza Motorsport, but they're going to reach, unusual groups, if you like. Would you say the technology will filter down in a similar way to standard understood advertising in that way?
Definitely. I mean, I go as far as to say we have the tech
we have,
now.
yeah.
We have it and it's ready. I mean, yes, okay, because the ones who will probably most likely be more interested in the advertising things are the smaller companies, because it's a new revenue stream for them. It opens up access to just more money, basically, because there are a lot of 1-2 man studios who are working off their own savings and stuff like that. So this opens up an opportunity for them. But we have the technology to group through genre and audience and stuff. So we can say, don't worry, you won't be on your own. We can put you in the same pot as this game. We can put you in that pot. So you might be a relatively niche sport, jiu-jitsu or something. Like, it's nowhere near on the levels of cricket or football or anything like that. But get enough jiu-jitsu games together with their individual pots of DAUs, and you suddenly have a very niche, semi-large audience that a brand may find very, very appealing. And there's no reason why you can't do that with various different genres and different locations and just audience types. Like, if you want to target a very specific niche audience, there's no reason why we can't group together 50 different games that have that audience, although in small pockets, and group them together into one larger pool, so you're still targeting that audience. And then the brand wins because they get what they need out of it, and the publishers also, it just helps them get a bit of money, and it kills that worry of, is my game big enough to do people want to advertise in it? And it sort of kills that worry they may have. Yeah.
Well, it certainly sounds like you've got everybody covered, big companies, small companies. I guess final question really is, can you give any advice now looking to the future?
Well, I mean, I think certainly from an advertising perspective, I think we are right at the beginning of a very exciting time for gaming, and for the the kind of capabilities of the technology. We are really only seeing the beginning of it. I think it's going to get very immersive. It's going to get very personalised and tailored, very relevant. I think the possibilities that really are endless, and over the next couple of years with the launch of cloud gaming, obviously, making gaming more accessible to pretty much everybody, and obviously 5G, meaning you can play on the go. I think that sort of 24-hour access to gaming, and therefore those brands associated with particular games, it really is an ad category that's just it's going to erupt over the next year or two, and it's nice to be part of that. I think it's going to be very exciting. I think we're working with several partners at the moment to really carve out a standard, because there isn't a benchmark because it hasn't been done before, right? So, I mean, BidStack, we see ourselves as innovators in terms of kind of setting those benchmarks for the industry, really kind of leading the way, if you like, and then hoping that as we move and as we prove our point that there is money there, that it can be done well, that actually gaming and advertising do work hand in hand, we'll start to see, you know, a much easier way of being able to just plug in and buy ads across small indie titles right up to big AAA titles as well. So it's coming, definitely. But I think publisher side, as Rob will explain as well, it's probably quite exciting for them as well.
Yeah, massively. I mean, like you said, this is just the start. Gaming is now at a point where advertising can be implemented in a way that doesn't affect the work and the art of the game. So, and it's just the way the industry is moving, whether you like it or not. In the same way we went from reading a newspaper and listening to radio to looking on your phones and watching TV. This is the next technological step, and it's just the way it works. So from a brand's perspective, if brands want to continue tapping into that iPad generation, because everyone's on iPads and stuff now and all that, so in 5-10 years time they're not going to be watching linear TV. I mean, I don't unless I'm watching sport, I rarely watch live TV. Everything's catch up where you can skip the ads, so I don't really listen to the radio because everything's on Apple Music or Spotify on demand. Don't really read the newspaper and stuff. So how are you reaching me? Where's your channel? And this is it now, and it's opened up, and there is an access point here. I mean, there's some ridiculous stats that are like teenage and stuff. The average person plays 7.5 hours a week or something of gaming or something like
crazy.
that, and that's only going to grow and grow and grow as game becomes, like you said, a lot more accessible. So if you don't have a choice to get involved in it. If you want to keep targeting this audience over the next 5 to 10 to 20 years, this is where they're going to be. They're still sat in front of screens. They haven't gone out on their bikes or anything. They're still sat in front of screens. They're just not in front of the screen that you're still paying a lot of money to target, and they're not actually on the end of it. It's very hard to appreciate an ad and acknowledge a brand when you're fast forwarding times 30, skipping through a recording on Sky, you know. And then from the publisher side of things, this is a channel. Like it's very hard to make money in a very, very saturated industry. I mean, there are something like 8,000 new games or apps put on stores and stuff every week. So how do you stand out? Where can you make money from that? Because not everyone can sell 1 billion copies and have 250 million users like Fortnite managed to do or anything like that. So where does your revenue come from? You've got to find something. You've got to find something that doesn't ruin your game, doesn't annoy your audiences. You maintain that user retention and stuff. And this is it. This is that option is now available to you in very, very easy packages.
Well, it's been great hearing your feedback on that. I mean, we've gone from marketing being a very separate thing to being fused in, integrated, and becoming a part of that world in a way that's authentic, the way that works. And I think, as I say, marketing can be very invasive. And I think it's educating people and finding the right balance. And I think today we've really learned a lot about that. So, well, Nina, Rob, thank you very much for coming in today for this conversation.
Thank you for having us.
And it's been very insightful. And thank you for watching. New episodes will be available every week. And if you've enjoyed this one, please make sure to subscribe on your app of choice and leave a review. Don't forget to follow Logitech on Twitter at LogitechGUK, Facebook at logitechg.uk and Instagram at LogitechG. There you'll be able to learn more about the new Lightspeed wireless range that's now available. I'm Alan Boyston. See you next time.